love you more dearly, follow you more nearly, day by day. Amen. Please be seated. For anybody who wasn't here last week, I want to catch you up real quick. In my sermon, I had got everybody excited because I said, great news, it's year B in the Episcopal Church. We're going to be reading all of the Gospel of Mark. It's going to be so exciting. We have some fun things ahead. It's going to be leading our discussion all through the course of this year, so get ready. And so now it's been one Sunday, and the very next Sunday, we are, of course, reading the Gospel of John. There's a reason for that, though. There's a reason. We are going to be reading Mark, but Mark is a lot shorter than Matthew or Luke. We read all of Matthew in year A and all of Luke in year C. Mark's a little shorter, so we need to put some filler in there sometimes to fill out some of the year. And this is one of those Sundays. And there's a reason why we chose this particular reading for this Sunday. And it's because Jesus is now starting out on his earthly ministry. We had the baptism of Jesus last week. Jesus is baptized, he comes out of the water, and then he begins his earthly ministry that he's called to. And one of the first things he'll need to do is gather his disciples around him. And that's why we have this reading today. The tradition used to be that the rabbis would go from town to town, and as the rabbis went out and taught and led the communities, they gathered disciples around them, which meant followers, but it also meant learners. It meant people who would see the rabbi come into town and they'd be inspired and they would say, that rabbi there, that's the one I want to learn from. That's the one I want to follow from town to town and learn how to be like that rabbi there. And that's what Jesus was doing. Jesus came into town, and this is where he gathered Andrew and Simon, who would become Peter, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee, and Philip and Nathanael. And Philip comes running up to Nathanael and says to Nathanael, you've got to check this rabbi out, this guy who's come into town. And Nathanael's response is basically, what, you mean that guy from Nazareth? Now, Nazareth was not the most reputable part of town. You think to yourself, in this time period, think of yourself of where you think of sort of like the not quite nice part of town, maybe the place you wouldn't want to send your kids, or you wouldn't want to be alone or stranded for too long. That's kind of like not the nice part of town. If you insert that into Nazareth, right, that gives you a sense of what Nathanael is thinking. This guy Jesus, can anything good come of him? But Nathanael was doing what most of us do all the time, which is we make generalizations. We assume we know things about folks by grouping them into general categories. Part of why we do this is to survive, right? You can't intimately know each and every one of the thousands and thousands of people around you all the time. So we make generalizations. When you see somebody that's wearing a nice suit and polished shoes, and they've got, gleaming white straight teeth, and we start to assume certain things about them. Or we see somebody that we know, came from the wrong side of town. We know where they're from. We know they finished school or something like that. And we start assuming things we know. We start assuming we know things about them before we've even gotten to meet them. Part of that's how we survive. And that's okay, but we need to be careful to never put ourselves in the place of looking at those generalizations and thinking that we can use that to determine someone's worthiness. Worthiness of dignity, worthiness of compassion, love. When Jesus came into town to serve as their rabbi, and the disciples were thinking about following him, he was going to give them a message that was founded in this idea of loving God and loving your neighbor. And it wasn't based on those generalizations. It wasn't based on the color of anyone's skin or what town they were from, if they were male or female, if they had the right pedigree or not, if they had the right accent or not. The only category that mattered to Jesus was neighbor. Now, Nathanael found himself in a place of needing to judge for himself. Was he going to be willing to be open-minded and look beyond the generalization and see somebody worth getting to be in relationship with. Nathaniel is not the only example we have of disciples who do this. Much more recent example, we have a great example of a disciple that we're celebrating this weekend in the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., where we are celebrating and honoring the ministry of Dr. King, truly a disciple of Jesus Christ if there ever was one. Dr. King did what Nathaniel was doing. He saw Jesus in his life, and he said, that rabbi, that's the one I want to follow. That's the one I want to be a learner of, a disciple of. And Dr. King did learn. And one of the lessons that he learned from that was this idea of being called to love our neighbor. Not love our neighbor based on what town they're from, what country they're from, the color of their skin. Even when other church leaders around Dr. King were telling him, you're pushing too hard. You're trying to make changes too fast. That equality will come, justice will come, but take it easy, give it time. But Dr. King was a disciple of Jesus, and he knew in his heart that one more day, even while he's sitting in Birmingham jail, one more day of people being judged inferior because of the country they come from is one day too long. One more day of somebody being judged inferior because of the color of their skin is one day too long. One more day of somebody being told that they're inferior because they're a woman is one day too long. And that Dr. King, championing this idea, came forward and said, from this day forward, people will be judged in my heart by the one label that matters, which is neighbor. Neighbor. That each and every one of us are created in the image of God. Created by Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ who would love them so much and find them worthy of being made in his own image. To live and dwell as them. And so those are the ministries, those are the disciples that we have as examples to follow in our lives. When we're going and choosing how we're going to live in our lives, we make the generalizations all the time. We have to survive. But to always ask ourselves, when are we being like Philip? Running to the other potential disciples around us and saying, you've got to check this guy out, Jesus Christ. You've got to check out this leader who has taught us how to judge people as worthy of love and compassion and justice in this world. We can follow the example of Dr. King, who judged everybody as neighbor, rather than judging them as African or European or South American or black or white or male or female. And we can choose to be like Nathaniel, who looked and he saw a man from Nazareth and chose to be open-minded and approach him anyway, with open heart and open mind, and had his eyes opened to the amazing teacher that Jesus Christ turned out to be. So each and every one of us are called to that kind of discipleship in our lives. And we give thanks for the examples of these disciples. We give thanks that our rabbi, Jesus Christ, came into town and said, come and follow me. And like Samuel, we said, here I am, Lord. Your servant is listening. And we found that this unscrupulous-looking man from Nazareth changed our lives forever. Thank you.